Episode 71, Newly Married and Unemployed.
Welcome to the First Year Married podcast, where we get real about building the marriage of your dreams. I'm marriage coach Kayla Levin, and I take newly married and engaged women from anxious and insecure to confident and connected through practical tips, real-life inspiration, and more than a little self-awareness along the way. Welcome back. I hope everyone's doing really well. I hope you are taking such good care of yourself during these crazy Corona times, and you are healthy and you are doing whatever you need to be doing to stay safe and to stay sane. We've had a couple episodes on that over the past couple weeks if you need to go back and review or hear them for the first time. First of all, I've had a bunch of new messages from people lately asking what should they do if they've just come across the First Year Married podcast and they want to hear it and they're giving themselves like a lot of pressure over whether they should go back and listen from the beginning or start at the end. And I just want to say that you totally get to choose. I get a lot of type A's, and I understand that because I'm a bit type A myself. And I guess like attracts like, and we want to do it right and we want to check off all the boxes. And of course, I would love it for everyone to go back and to just totally dive in and to hear all the episodes and everything. But honestly, I don't know that that's completely necessary. So I generally say I would recommend to listen to the first 5. You're going to get some major foundations of the First Year Married course and sort of hear from the very beginning, and then go through and click off any that look really interesting to you. You can even usually on your app, especially if you're on iTunes, the Apple Podcasts, you can just click the download. So it's already ready to go. And any topics that you see there that you think would be helpful for you, go ahead and listen. Then you could just subscribe and then you'll hear these episodes as they come out. So I hope that's helpful for you, trying to keep it kind of simple so that your type A doesn't get overwhelmed. And welcome. And I'm so happy you're here. So I wanted to talk this week about fear about unemployment, about the stress about unemployment. I know right now, as I'm recording this, we are still in COVID lockdown and a lot of people are either dealing with cutbacks or layoffs. But even if it's not now, this is something that comes up for a lot of people. I know for us, we burned all straight through that wedding money in those first 3 months because we were really struggling to find the right kind of work. We just moved back from living abroad, and we definitely had a up close and personal experience with being a newlywed and experiencing unemployment. All I can say is I wish I knew then what I know now. But at the same time, one of the things that I know now, which I can share with you, which you can apply immediately, is this little shift that has helped me so much and that I love to share with my clients and all of you, which is that when we're in the hard times, we so want to resist it. We so want to feel and insist mentally that this shouldn't be happening, right? That this is very, very, very bad. And of course, we don't go out of our way to invite the hard times. We don't, whether it's unemployment or if it's health struggles or any number of things, right? We don't want these things to happen. But as a newlywed, it doesn't have to be a threat to your relationship. In fact, when you go through these experiences, I like to encourage you to imagine yourself 10, 20 years down the line, even describing this to your children or your grandchildren and saying, yeah, we were dealing with a lot of unemployment. We really struggled financially. We had to work it out. We had to learn. We had to come together and bond as a couple. We had to learn how to have each other's back. Those are all the things that are possible. And what I want to say to you is that from our experience, while I know that there are people who for sure struggle with unemployment more than we did in our first year of marriage, but it was really, really a major stress for a good several months when we were first married. The truth is that I wouldn't trade that in now looking back over it, right? Looking back over how we learned to manage our anxiety, to show each other that I still believe in you, I still support you, I still know you're going to be able to do this, is worth so much more than a couple paychecks, right? It's worth so much more than having to turn around and ask someone to borrow some money or to put more on your credit card than you wanted to be able to do. And I just want to offer that shift to you, that this thing that might feel really scary and really dangerous, well, again, we don't pursue it. We don't look for it or invite it into our life. You never know what things are going to actually become the glue that holds you together, that makes you feel so strong and so solid. And I've been thinking a lot lately about, this phrase happily ever after, and like, what is our happily ever? Like, what are we looking for? Right. And I think for everyone, it's something different. And I think it's a really, really wonderful question to ask yourself. Like, what does happily ever after really mean to me? Right. Because we know it doesn't mean the Disney version, right? It means something much deeper than that. And I know for me, a lot of it has to do with confidence and security, with showing up the way that I want to show up, with my husband knowing that I've got his back, knowing that he's got mine. And as I've said many times in this podcast, that I'm not always the perfect wife and he's not always the perfect husband, and that we have room for that and we have space for that, because this is a marriage where we can totally be ourselves, but we know that we're both trying to be our very best as much as we can be. So let's go back to this unemployment conversation. So here are just a couple tips that I want to offer you beyond that sort of macro level of how can this be something that can actually come and strengthen your relationship? And yes, it is actually possible. So number one, and most important, is to remember you're in this together. As a newlywed, we're still kind of making that mental shift from I have to look out for myself and I have to take care of myself and I'm an independent to I'm part of a team, right? And at the end of the day, it's a team, and that's the most important and empowering thing. You can do so much more on a team than you can do by yourself. It's a great thing, but it's a little bit of an adjustment. And so what that means is that if he's not, let's say, applying to the right jobs or applying to enough jobs, or you're thinking that he's criticizing you because you shouldn't have gotten laid off, or whatever is going on, you just want to kind of give yourself that mental check. Wait a second, we're in this together. Like, it's us versus the world of employment. Like, how do we tackle it together? We're going to do this together. So does he need my support? Now, be careful, because sometimes I see women saying that I want to support my husband, but what that actually means is I want to sort of try and get him to do what I think he should be doing. So I'm going to support him by, printing up all of the like resume workshops that I saw, or you know what I'm saying? That's not what I mean by support. Support means, what does he need right now? Like, what's going to be gas in his tank? So that's the number one, is to just get back into that place. Remind yourself, team. We always call ourselves Team Levin, right? We are Team Levin. And number two is to prepare ahead of time. Now, I don't mean prepare ahead of time for unemployment. That would be the most ridiculously unhelpful advice I could offer you right now, because if you're listening to this, like, come on, that's not helpful. Obviously, we know we want to get on top of our finances and we want to budget and we put money aside. You've heard that from me before. That wouldn't be helpful at this podcast episode. What I mean by prepare ahead of time is to prepare mentally ahead of time. If you're struggling with your unemployment or your husband's unemployment, I want to offer you that you can think whatever you want to think about it. No one is going to come and check. In fact, this will just go to show how like young and immature my husband and I were when we got married. We often talked about how we felt like we were on an extended honeymoon. We were still young enough to not really feel the gravity of the financial pressure, right? And the truth is that in a way that was helpful. It wasn't that we weren't working towards getting jobs. It wasn't that we weren't following all the protocol. What it did mean is that we weren't feeling burnt out or beat down or not worthy. We just kind of felt like, well, I guess we were supposed to have some more time together than we thought we were supposed to have, which is great, because I don't know if I've ever told you about our honeymoon, but it was terrible. So that's what we needed, I guess. Okay, so preparing ahead of time mentally. What do I want to think about this? Especially if you're concerned about your husband and his career and how he's doing and performing and applying and all of the things. What do you want to be thinking about it? To get to that thought, I would ask you, how do you want to be showing up? Right? Now, how would you show up if you knew with absolute certainty that this guy has it in the bag? He is so going to be successful. So then how would you be showing up in your marriage? Right? And then on the other hand, if you're worried about yourself and you're worried about your employment, right? Or you're worried about what your husband thinks about you because you're not employed. So how would you be showing up if you knew it was going to be okay? If you knew that it was in the bag, that you were for sure going to be getting a great job? How would you be showing up? And start practicing some of that thinking ahead of time. Because when you start to identify what those thoughts are that create that showing upness, that way that you're showing up. So usually those thoughts are totally available right now. Like we can just start practicing them out now, right? Now, going back to if it's his career, I want to tell you that if you are a woman and you are married to a man, or even seriously dating a man, and he is struggling in the employment department, that it is very, very likely that your lower brain is going to completely freak out. Okay, we're going to go into this, but I want you to know that it's okay. So I want to read to you this excerpt from this book that I've been reading, The Female Brain by, I hope I'm saying this right, Luann Brizendine. It's an unbelievable book. I totally geek out on learning about the brain and how it works, and specifically how men and women are wired differently, because I just feel like this is absolutely the most horribly missing thing. I mean, every single person, even if you're not even married, you are dealing, 50% of the population is the other gender. Like, wouldn't it be helpful for us to have some basic concept of how we're wired differently? This book goes into sort of like a meta study of all the different studies, pulling them together of what we know scientifically. And she has another book called The Male Brain, and I'm basically reading them both at the same time, because I read a chapter of one and I'm like, wait, I have to know what she says about that. And I'm like flipping all through, and I've read half of it twice, and they're just great if you're like me and a total geek. Okay, so I'm going to read you this section. That our mental instincts haven't changed in millions of years may explain why women worldwide look for the same ideal qualities in a long-term mate, according to the evolutionary psychologist David Buss. For over 5 years, Buss studied the mate preferences of more than 10,000 individuals in 37 cultures around the world, from West Germans and Taiwanese to Mbuti Pygmies and Aleut Eskimos. I'm sorry if I'm butchering those. He discovered that in every culture, women are less concerned with a potential husband's visual appeal and more interested in his material resources and social status. Okay? And the author goes on to discuss how this makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary perspective. Now, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, it is being able to create new children and being able to sustain them to adulthood, right? So when we look for a healthy, vibrant, like strong-looking husband, again, I'm talking about the lower brain. I'm talking about our wiring. I'm not talking about like our wise and higher level self. But that bias towards a stronger looking man or a taller man or just a generally healthier looking man is coming from, are these genes healthy genes, right? Will this create a healthy baby? But knowing that I want this baby to survive to adulthood, so the sort of cave woman part of my brain is looking for, is he successful? Because that is the modern day equivalent of, can he bring home a wolf, right? Or whatever people eat. Right. So is he successful? Can he provide? And today what that means is his career success and his income. That is basically the size of his caveman club, right? Is the paycheck. Again, I am talking about the lower brain, and I don't think this is a problem. Okay. So I could imagine that some people would be squeamish about discussing this kind of research and these kinds of suggested conclusions. So we don't know why women are wired this way. We don't know why 10,000 women in 37 different cultures have such a clear preference for the same thing. Regardless, you see this 37 different cultures, totally different customs, totally different ways of seeing the world, right? And still had the same clear preferences. So there's something about a wiring that doesn't make me squeamish. I think it might make some people squeamish, because the truth is that for such a long time, talking about wiring and gender difference was used against women. And I think even today it's still being used against individuals. But to me, I find this really helpful. And specifically in this episode, when we're talking about unemployment, why? Because if my husband is struggling with his job, and I am reacting on a visceral level, like I cannot handle what's happening, and I actually feel a little bit unsafe about it. And the way that I know that this is like such a visceral reaction is that I feel like it needs to change immediately. Like I can't I can't handle it. I need him to get a job, or I need him to start applying, or I need him to just deal with it differently. It's very helpful for me to imagine that all of us, men and women, we all have a lower, kind of more animal part of our brain. And as a woman, what that might be doing for me is creating this feeling that I might be a little bit in danger if he can't provide. And especially because I'm married to him now, which means I'm committed here, right? And isn't that interesting? Like, isn't that totally fine? Now that I notice that this is just some kind of like old wiring, this wiring doesn't know that I'm really good at making money too. This wiring doesn't know that women totally can work. This wiring doesn't know that I'm able to have a child and have a job at the same time, and I don't have to like abandon my baby to go hunt, right? So look at that. There's this kind of old wiring, and that's interesting, and it's informative. And now when I look at myself kind of starting to panic, I could be like, wait, that's like, we need to update the computer. That's just old. Okay. I don't need to even entertain it so much because it's just old wiring. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense the way that I'm explaining it. Like, to me, it's a little bit more empowering to kind of get some of that clarity. So the answer, right? Because when your brain is asking, like, how is it possible for him to provide, right, if he doesn't have a job? And the answer is we come back to our higher brain. We come back to our wisdom. And this is what I mean by prepare ahead of time, because your lower brain speaks in the moment, right? In the moment when he comes home and he's like, sorry, I just, had the interview and I totally did terrible. And I don't think they're going to call me. So your lower brain is going to start to panic. And if you plan ahead of time, and if you think ahead of time, okay, what is my whole perspective on this whole job hunt? What is my perspective on my husband and his earning capacity? What is my perspective on my husband's value, regardless of his earning capacity? Because his value is based on so much more than what he brings home in his paycheck, right? So what is it that I value in my husband? What are the things that I really honor in him as an individual? And I've planned that ahead of time. So then now I've set up a wiring system in my brain that I can access when in the moment my lower brain wants to kick in, right? I have a plan B and I can go there. Really, I guess that's the plan A. I don't know. You decide. Another piece that I wanted to talk about was leaving space for him to be big. Now, this is something that I sometimes see, whether it comes to sort of like being able to manage in the house, or the way that he's dealing socially, or a lot of the times how he's managing in his career. And that is that we almost, kind of go into like a mommy mode of like, he needs to be educated, like he's doing something wrong. So I need to start like sort of showing him or explaining to him, or like if necessary, nagging him to understand, like, this isn't really how you talk to people like that. Or, you're not really going to get a job if you don't take care of that, or any number of things along those lines. Right. And the best way that I feel to combat that is I imagine the man. Sometimes I'm imagining my clients' men. Sometimes I'm imagining, not that I know they look like it. Sometimes I'm imagining my husband, if this is something I'm working on. And I imagine him, and then I imagine literally a bubble around him, which is the space of his potential. And I imagine myself when I'm in that mode of trying to micromanage and having no faith in his ability to figure it out, or that maybe the way he's doing things is possibly even for a good reason. Because I think it's wrong doesn't mean that it's actually wrong, right? We forget, right, that he's like an individual and he functioned perfectly fine before we were married, and maybe he's going to be okay even if he doesn't clean up after himself immediately after finishing dinner, or whatever the thing is, right? I imagine myself like smushing that bubble until it smushes him and then he becomes small. It's like I am physically forcing him into becoming a smaller version of himself, when what I want to be doing, what I want to be doing in every one of my relationships, and most particularly in my marriage, is leaving so much space for him to grow into who he's going to be. Not for me to manipulate my way into getting the potential because I'm not happy with who he is now. Not at all. But because I know every year I've been married to my husband, and he's going to leave this in because he edits the podcast, he's become more amazing, more incredible, more mature, more wise. I've seen so many new things come from him. And he's nothing like the man that I married 10 and a half, almost 11 years ago, right? He's changed so much. He's evolved so much. My curiosity is like overflowing in who he's going to become, I don't want to smush the bubble and make it any harder for him to continue to evolve, because this evolution is like, I've got front row seats. This is amazing. It's so cool to watch, right? When else in your life are you, because I guess other than like parenting, are you so up close and personal with a person that you can actually watch their evolution as a human being over time in a really deep and meaningful way? It's unbelievable, right? And so I literally imagine myself stepping back, letting the bubble get big. I don't know how he's going to grow. I don't know what potential I see and what potential he sees and what potential the world and life is just going to bring out of him. I have no idea, right? But what I do know is that when I see him as that big, then I'm not coming in and sort of like treating him like this petty little child who doesn't know any better. When my husband stops and takes some time for himself, and I'm remembering how big he is, how big I want to let him be as a person, as a human being, as a spirit, then I'm not going to be like annoyed that he's spending 20 extra minutes on his phone than I thought he was going to be. Or when he's a little bit late for the thing that I thought he should. It's not a boundary or a respect issue for me, because he's this incredible individual. He's probably making a decision. Or you know what? Maybe he is making a mistake. And maybe there's a whole entire world out there that can help educate him. But my job, that I've decided anyway, is to hold the space. My job is not to be the HR manager to make sure that he's applying appropriately. My job is not to make sure that that I'm the etiquette teacher, to make sure that he learns how to behave properly. None of the things, right? Personal trainer, any of the stuff, okay? Not my job. My job is to hold space. I fully believe, and I have seen this in my marriage, life will teach him whatever he needs to know. But if I come in and try and teach him myself, now I've created a dynamic that frankly, I don't like in my marriage, and I don't want it there. And I want to encourage you to consider that for yourself too. Okay. So my friends, I want to keep this one short and sweet. So your main things, planning ahead of time. What is your perspective? What is your macro approach to your husband, to his potential, to his career? And then if you're the one struggling with employment, to yourself. You can do all this. No one is going to come along and be like, oh my gosh, she thinks way too much of herself. Because they don't know what you're thinking unless you tell them, and you don't have to, right? So why not think like it's totally in the bag, right? You can like just try it on for fun, like a dress that you would never normally wear. Like just put it on and see what happens. We can play with our thoughts. I want you to know that. Some of you get very serious about like, this came up in the last podcast episode, your thoughts about your thoughts. Like you have a thought and you think this is very meaningful and deep that you're having that kind of thought, and you're the kind of person that thinks those thoughts. And what are we going to do about these thoughts? And sometimes I'm like, what if you just try something else on? Like have some fun with this. Why not? This doesn't have to be so serious. Okay. So we're planning ahead of time. We're picking our kind of macro picture. We are leaving space for him to be big. We are leaving space for ourselves to be big. We don't need to smoosh anyone. No smooshing, please. And I just want to tell you, I am so here for you. If there is anything that I can do, I know that the main thing that we have committed to doing is to keeping the First Year Married course at pay what you can during the COVID lockdown. So as long as we are in this, and I hope that we will be out of it very, very soon, the course is pay what you can with a minimum registration fee of $20 all the way up to the normal course payment. Inside that group, we've had some pretty phenomenal discussions. We have a monthly call where you can come on, you can ask me any questions. I am coaching people in that group. People are supporting each other in the group. And of course, you get lifetime access to my full 6 weeks of material. It's the process that I created to take you from newlywed to actually being confident and secure in your marriage, to understanding your husband much more deeply, understanding how his brain is ticking very differently than yours, having a whole approach to how you are going to use this material in terms of your self-care, in terms of your intimate life, in terms of everything to do with your extended family and the pressures that can come along with marriage. It is my absolute honor to be sharing it with you. Those of you who asked, no, the $20 fee does not include a debt to pay back to me the rest of the course later. It's $20. If that's what you can pay, that's what you pay. It is my honor to be sharing it with all of you and to be seeing the beautiful work and transformations you've been doing inside the course. I hope to see you in there. If not, I will see you back here on the First Remarried podcast next week. Have an amazing week. Bye-bye.